This conference will now be recorded.
This is FRE02's 2019 Facility Plan meeting with the State Construction Department. We'll introduce ourselves first.
Amber Leach with Planning. My primary role is to work with the districts and preparation of the documents that we use for today's facility plan.
My name is Troy Decker, Planning. My responsibility here is quality control, make sure our facility plans have what state statute requires in them, abide by rules and regs, and then also to make sure that their content is of such a nature that we can develop budgets through this process, as well as reports to the select committee and other committees like our commission, of course, that require information.
I'm Charlie Kaufman. My primary role in planning is providing all the reports and doing all the data work and doing all the research that's needed for these facility plans.
My name is Steve McDonald. I'm your new regional project manager with the School Facilities Division. I'll be the project manager for the Northwest region of the state. I look forward to working with you guys.
Paul Severson. I provide leadership and coordination amongst the project management team. I'm working with Steve a little more closely this year because he's new to the process, and but we welcome him on board.
Go ahead, school district.
This is Amanda Easton. I'm the business manager.
And hi, I am Caleb Neal, and I'm the tech director here.
All right. Well, welcome this afternoon. Appreciate you guys joining us. This is an important part of the process for that state statute requires. So with that, I'm going to turn off our video camera. You still should be able to see my screen. And with that, we'll just start going down through here. On the first part, it's just verification, and I'll just kind of whip through that fairly quickly. But at any point, school district, if you have any questions, comments, or stuff, just speak up, and I'll certainly give you opportunity as well at the end of each section. So appreciate you guys joining us. I think we have everybody down who are part of the meeting, so we'll move on forward with that. Charlie has done a lot of stuff with the GIS sites for the counties and just put some visuals on here. This is apparently our latest version is still when they were constructing the school and the new track and stuff, so that's just there. The reason we do this, by the way, is because we do have legislators, sometimes the governor's office requests facility plans to be sent to them for specific school districts. And so we've tried to provide just a succinct informational plan that can give them a full look at what's going on in the school district without going through a lot of unnecessary information. So that's why we started putting check boxes in here and stuff, just to make sure that we do our job. So your acreages are important because they are reported to WDE. They impact your groundskeeper allowances, which affects obviously your operations. And so thank you for checking those and verifying that they're accurate, because that's important for your money through WDE. At this portion, nothing else is no land leases, land disposition, land acquisition. So the AIM database is up to date at this point with this year's information for land. Property profiles, these are basically your buildings, and they're important because the square footage impacts your major maintenance payments and also your WDE operations and maintenance payments as well for taking care of the buildings and grounds and stuff. So those are important, so thank you for updating those or verifying that they're accurate. And then the next one is leases, and you guys have quite a few leases, and I appreciate the tour. I think it was last summer that I got from you guys, and it was just a really good tour and gave me a much better understanding of what's happening in your leased buildings, but the buildings you own but you lease. But these can impact if they have qualifying educational programs. These can impact by allowing your allowable square footage to be counted for that. If your ADM then drives square footage up or past that amount, then you can actually get money for major maintenance for those spaces. But if your ADM, of course, is low and you're never up to that point where that allowable square footage is realized, then it probably wouldn't make a difference, but at least you get credit for educational portions of your buildings that are being leased out. And then enhancements, we appreciate you doing this. This is a report that we do have to report to the select committee each year and to our commission. And we appreciate you just allowing us to acknowledge that it's up to date. So with those, we've got all our AIM database up to date to this point. District appropriations, this is if you have any capital projects that still have monies remaining on them, and you have none. You've closed out your previous one for your K-12 building and site, so there's nothing to report there or no funds to revert, so I think we're pretty solid there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve for security.
As you guys are aware from previous meetings, especially last year, in 2014, the legislature appropriated $9 million to the school districts for security capital money that you were able to use. They identified the highlighted 8 projects that are on this particular screen that money was supposed to be spent on or earmarked for those particular items to spend that money on in 2014. When we take a look at your security capital picture right now, it really looks like we have pretty much everything encumbered on those 2 items there. So not really any security capital dollars left for you to work with at this point. I did want to point out that there is currently a bill in the legislature to appropriate an additional $4.9 million to the schools in security money. With that appropriation, that money will be freed up to use on any of the 20 listed security items. Now that's an item that'll be approved next year and probably appropriated for the following July. But that is something that's coming down the pike. There is some more money in the works in the legislature, and if that gets approved, you'll see some more security capital money coming your way. Moving on to the major maintenance security balance. In 2016, the House passed appropriations and legislations to allow you to use 10% of your major maintenance money for security purposes. And again, those weren't earmarked to those 8 things. Those were kind of opened up for you to be able to use. One thing we want to point out is the appropriation was re-upped in 2018. So there's money in the 2017 and 2018 fiscal year picture for you. But the word we're getting now is the 10% security major maintenance is not assured in the future. And as a matter of fact, it looks kind of bleak for that. So what we need to express to you here is it's very important to be diligent with these dollars here. We cannot over expend what's in the 10% major maintenance security portion there, because there will not be, or likely will not be, future appropriations for that particular money. So it looks like you guys jumped on your security capital, did a good job with that. It looks like you do still have some dollars here in your 10% major maintenance security balance, so I'd be happy to have further discussions with you on down the road. The last thing I will point out is we encourage you to go out and look at other avenues to present some security funds to you. There are a number of grants that are available through Homeland Security, Department of Justice, and things like that. So we encourage you to do that. We commend you for using the security capital dollars that you were given. We want to help you to be diligent with this remaining 10% security balance, and advise you there are other avenues out there for you. And with that, I don't have any further comments.
So looks like you guys wanted to discuss this a little bit. Did Steve cover it, or is there additional information you need?
The only thing that I would say, there's a couple of things. So we actually, I think, will take care of almost all of that remaining balance with a recent project that we've done that we're still working on billing out for security cameras for our entire campus, all buildings within the school district. The other part of that is, I was just wondering, so, it's becoming really common that school districts are having these safety and security evaluations done. So we recently did one through Paul Tim and paid the $5,000 to see what our security looks like on our campus. And he came back with probably around $400,000 worth of things that need to be done. And it's all new. None of it would be, hardly any would be replacement. The majority of it would be new. And so other than grants, you know, I'm wondering if there's any legislation out there or if you guys have had discussions, because I know what we went through with Paul Tim is not new. There's lots of school districts this year that are having these same things done. And it's leaving all of us in this position of, in order to make our schools a safer place from active shooters and whatever different issues there would be, what other opportunities would we have, if there could be any, even through major maintenance, to do some of this work?
Yeah, like Steve said, that 2017-18 session laws that allowed 10% out of your major maintenance, there's no talk for that continuing at this point. So that's not an anticipated amount. And what I think what the legislature realizes, at least to a certain extent, is the fact that when you start cutting out 10% for security out of major maintenance, you're also removing the regular major maintenance capability of taking care of your buildings with that money. So you're actually diluting your major maintenance for, in reality, capital security that should be funded through capital security that is not, and therefore you're using major maintenance. And I think it was a good stopgap for a little while there, but I think that the emphasis is definitely going down to additional, this 4.9 million statewide and that kind of stuff. So outside of that, there really is nothing else. There is some legislation, and I think Steve mentioned the fact that that the new legislation, if that 4.9 within that portion of the bill, it does open up those 8 elements to all 20 elements. But the difference is, though, is those 20 elements, you have to have something that was previously generating major or capital funding from the previous assessment in order to use that. So that may, and I don't know your full, I don't know if this is all of everything they have, but so if you have categories that are funded partially or did generate some monies other than the 2 you have here, that those, if that bill passes, you could take that money and then apply it to those other elements that generated past revenue or past amounts on a categorical basis. Other than that, there really isn't anything there. Charlie's going to be talking in just a few minutes, where WDE is tasked to work with Homeland Security and some us and some other agencies in order to develop some guidelines for security and safety within school districts. But that's really standards, not anything that I know of that actually is talking about a funding source. So right now, what you see is what you have. Unless the 4.9 goes through, and then you may be able to have a little more flexibility on using that and applying it to systems that were assessed previously that generated those original funds.
So can I ask you this then, that previous security assessment, I think I've viewed that information last year in order to prepare for this meeting last year. I'm wondering, would they ever open that up to re-looking at it? Because I can't, just looking at it, not all of the areas match up to what our evaluation was through Paul Tim, areas that needed focusing on.
Great question. Paul, why don't you answer that one? I know you have that answer.
Well, the criteria that Paul Tim is looking at is not limited. We currently have a guideline that was put together for security for schools in 2015, and that currently is what we use for our evaluations on this kind of funding. Now, I don't know what criteria that Paul Tim was using, but I would suspect that it is different than the criteria that were established and put in place by our commission. So unless that gets modified with this new legislation if it goes through with WDE, Homeland Security, ourselves, and others, I think we would still be in the same path that we have been on. So I think you're looking at just an evaluation that just varies from the one that currently is our state standard.
Thank you.
Go ahead and mute that. There you go, Paul. Thanks. All right, and I think he kind of said it as well. Amber was just kind of telling me that again, you know, there's things that are working through that behaviorally, training of staff, those things that are non-facility specific. Those things would have to be considered by the legislature for funding that would be separate from the facilities portion, which is what we're responsible for.
Of course, and the stuff in Paul Timms that I'm talking about, that's $400,000. It's facility related. It has nothing to do with training of staff. That's outside of that. This is just things that, you know, we have windows in every classroom, and some of that could be major maintenance. They need to be replaced with something that is it's like strengthened glass or something like that. You know, it's that kind of stuff, and there's pages and pages worth of things that need to be fixed or implemented, created, you know, that's new projects. So we'll just keep looking at it.
Yeah, and then I think you've also hit the nail on the head too with regard to, you know, these 10% security funds in major maintenance are a great resource because they definitionally, they don't have to qualify for major maintenance. So you always have those things and those kinds of needs that Paul Timm identified that would fit outside of replacement or repair of systems. However, I think school districts are being very aware too and are very cognizant of the fact that there are things that you can do that do qualify for regular major maintenance, and to get the most out of your buck is to identify those for regular major maintenance and actually use those funds, because you have many more of those funds than you do these other categories, to be able to use those to remedy those issues that you have that qualify for the major maintenance definition.
Right, and we have looked at that, and we definitely will continue to look at that. But the majority of our stuff is new, and it's just because of the layout of our school. There's things that would have to be modified or put in place that we currently don't have that would make it be new. So, but thank you for answering. I appreciate the conversation for sure.
Yeah, well, and these are kind of good discussions for us too, because not everything fits in a box. So sometimes there may be in the future a reevaluation of these buildings for security and updated, I would assume, Paul. And within that, we may look for opportunities to modify the assessment in such a way that may potentially cover additional elements that through some kind of a commission-approved process and then report to the select committee may generate some other opportunities for funding in areas that may not have been necessarily assessed in the past. What do you think of that, Paul? Is that a possibility?
Definitely, there is a chance that we may have another evaluation, in particular with the new statute. Unlike major maintenance, though, that there is a statutory requirement that we do a review on a specific schedule and ongoing schedule. Thus far, security has not had that kind of an emphasis placed on it through statute. So we will be waiting over time to see whether or not something like that does get requested by the legislature for us to do that, because it's quite costly to go through that process, and we'd be limited to being able to do that if the legislature gave us funds to do it once again.
All right. With that, then, thanks for the good, robust discussion. I think it's a good one. And again, it's also an opportunity for us to hear from all 48 school districts this year, those concerns about security, and for us to be able to be proactive in working with our commission to potentially make recommendations to the select committee in the future for continued as well as modified security fund requests. Capacity, let's go down to that. You guys are at 36.84%. So you have, obviously, you have an adequate facility to meet your needs from a capacity point of view. Looking at your enrollment projections, going to blow that up a little bit. You probably know that we go 10 years trailing data back with WDE that we report, or they report to us. And we take that 10 years trailing data and then we project it out into the future. And it's based on trends. For instance, your kindergarten to first grade survival rate, you just go kindergarten 2008, went to 2009, and then it was to first grade, second grade, 2010. So it's a stair step. So I always try to not assume that people know how this works. But on the first one, from kindergarten to first grade, there's a survival rate based on 10 years of an average trailing data. So like you went from 12 students to 11, 11 to 15, 16 to 14, 16 to 12, and so on. And we track that over the 12 or 10 years. We average it. And you guys from kindergarten to first grade have 104% survival rate. In some communities, it's an issue of you have kind of a two-tiered kindergarten approach where sometimes the students aren't quite ready to go to first grade, so they're held back that additional year and exposed to those basic concepts and just getting used to the education system, and then they're re-put back into first grade after a kind of almost a 2-year kindergarten. But just out of curiosity, why do you think you're getting that percentage? Is that accurate for you guys, or why are you getting that percentage jump to 104%? You're actually gaining students from kindergarten to first.
I guess I would assume that it's because we have a lot of smaller kids in our community. You know, Du Bois is a really tough community because we're an hour and a half away from anything around us. There's not a lot of jobs here, that kind of thing. So it might be easier for families of smaller kids to be here. And it's not uncommon for us to find as the kids get older that the families are relocating in other places.
Okay. All right. And then the other thing we like to do is just look at your kindergarten enrollment. And in kindergarten, you know, over the last 10 years, your average is 12 students, and you guys stick pretty close to that. You never go really super high. You had 16 a couple of years, 15 2 years ago, which is nice. So, referencing the fact that, like you said, you're not really close to any other community, this is associated, probably pretty well correlated with birth rates within your community itself.
Right. You know, the other thing I would add is we have our school has a program for pre-K, for preschool, and I know that that is really well attended. And honestly, if our community didn't have that, some of our family members would really struggle to pay all of the daycare costs in order for their children to have a place to stay while they're at work during the day too. So.
Okay. And then looking at your overall, if you took your K-12, your overall is down here is 158 students. So back in the 2009-10, you guys were pretty high. You kind of dropped down into the mid 150s and dropped down a little bit below that in a couple of years, and then this year as well. But you're staying fairly consistent here, it looks like, in the last give or take 6 or 7 years. All right, nothing. You're a pretty stable community. Nothing really big to talk about that. And fortunately, you're not going down, and you're not necessarily going up. You're maintaining, which is a blessing compared to the alternative.
Right.
Statewide list for capacity, Charlie.
So every year, the commission, per our department, per the commission rules and regulations, prioritizes capacity needs based on high capacity needs, medium and low, high being above 100%, medium between 95 and 100%, and low between 90 and 95%. And these are the needs that have been prioritized for this year. Basically, the only big change that's happened within the last year is that the SFC decided to go back to a restricted capacity of 16 students in a classroom for grades kindergarten through third grade, which changed a lot of the dynamics of this list and has provided a lot more needs across the state.
Thank you, Charlie. So I just put here a note, district has sufficient capacity for enrolled students. Anything else on capacity?
No, not at this time.
Charter schools, you do not have one, so we're good there. Condition, don't know if you need to, and I want to be sensitive. Some districts are very familiar with FCI scores, Facility Condition Index scores, and where they come from and how they're created. And how their buildings are assessed. Do you guys have any need for that? And I'd be happy to spend some time on that, or we can go down to the actual scores themselves. But the bottom line is an FCI score is a building score that represents deferred maintenance. And the higher the deferred or the more deferred maintenance there is, the higher the FCI score is. And categorically, that building is higher on an FCI list itself. For instance, this is just page one of multiple pages. We have like, I don't know, 400 and some education
407
buildings.
education buildings, roughly.
407 buildings that are on this list, but we just do the first page. You guys, of course, had a capital project, and so you're really well off on that. And then that was for educational buildings. This is for actual support facilities like bus barns and maintenance shops and boiler buildings and district offices that don't have educational use over 50%. So here are the top ones in the state. These are a little questionable of when they'll be financed or funded in the future, simply because they're limited funds that exist in Wyoming. There always have been, but more so now. And the legislature really wants to prioritize the educational buildings over support buildings. So it'll be interesting how this has worked out over time as the state grapples with the reality of all of its facilities, not just educational, but the support ones that enable education to occur. You guys, you're a 0.05, which means your facility is in phenomenal shape for your K-12. And then you've got some additional buildings for support, and they're in excellent shape as well. I did notice here that you do have some existing elements, and we've known this since the capital project, that were not upgraded during that major capital project, and that you'd like to discuss the heating and stuff like that. I did put down here that the building is in overall outstanding condition and would not qualify for consideration of capital project recommendation and I'll put here in the near future.
Sure.
So the district can use major maintenance funds, obviously, to replace, repair existing systems, and may request component funding. I think you mentioned that up in your comment. If major maintenance funds are insufficient or the cost is real high, the next opportunity to submit for component requests will be in 2020, because we do that on the front end of every biennium. Does that answer your question, or do you have further questions with regard to resources?
It certainly does answer my question. Thank you.
You betcha. And sorry to give you that bad news, but component funding is truly your best shot at it. And so when that comes around again in a couple of years in 2020, we'll open it up for more requests. And if the legislature is still considering those kinds of projects anyway, and that'll give you guys an opportunity to address maybe these larger dollar amounts. And we know that you have lots of other plans and stuff, and so you can save money over time for those larger things, or you can continue to spend on those higher needs and then ask for component funding and see if you can get it. And it's really, to be honest with you, it's a competition against other school districts who are experiencing probably the same or similar issues that you have with limited major maintenance funds.
So you said it's a competition. How do you guys decide or which schools get funded?
Great question. Down here, we'll just kind of skip to that really quick, and then we'll go back up. There actually is, like this year we had, try to make that big enough so you can see it. This year we had 31 requests. And so what we do is we open it up, obviously, to school districts. We provide training, a webinar, and stuff like that. We give districts about 10 to 11 months to submit a project, and they usually use their major maintenance to evaluate a building need, and Steve could work with you on this. So for instance, your heating system or whatever your main issues are, you can actually use major maintenance to bring on an architect or an engineer or a consultant to kind of develop the scope and the cost estimating and kind of get ready for a project like that, and then the justification for it, and then actually submit that during that process. But what happens then is we actually do not make that decision as a staff. The commission does receive a list, and that list is actually districts voluntarily submit their component projects through a process we've identified and has been approved through the commission. And it has varying weights of things that like your FCI score, how much money major maintenance do you have, what's your priorities in major maintenance. The committee does that, but it's made up of 12 district personnel. And what we try to do is get 3 from each region, the 4 quadrants of the state, Northeast, Northwest, Southwest, Southeast. And we try to get a superintendent from each of those regions, a business manager, and a facilities director. So, and we would love to have you guys volunteer for your part of the state. I think that you'd qualify for the Northwest. And anyway, those district personnel actually receive these component requests. They go through a process of valuing the different elements to that matrix that scores those requests. And then those 12 scores then are put into a composite score sheet, and then we actually, the committee ranks them from highest to lowest based on those criteria.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so with that, down to major maintenance now. Thank you for updating your statuses in AIM. That's an important housekeeping chore we have to do each year, and we do appreciate the district doing that. And then the project managers, of course, we try to get districts to plan ahead and before their facility plan meeting to submit their needed major maintenance work orders that allow the project manager to review those and kind of know that you have a plan going forward. And so we appreciate you doing that as well. The major maintenance balances, here's your major maintenance balances. And you total expenditures, this is based on your 680 form, of course, and you would know that if you submitted it. And I think a couple things are important here, and make sure that each district understands this. I'm sure you know that your 8 and 10% are definitionally the same. They mean the same thing. They can be used on buildings that necessarily don't qualify for the inventory with regard to state responsibility for taking care of them, such as teacherages, and enhancements, some, the track with regard to track lights or stuff like that. If it doesn't qualify for regular major maintenance, that's where 10%, as long as it's definitionally correct with what major maintenance is, replacing or repairing, it can qualify for enhancement 10%. But the 8% was, I think, the very first year they through state statute, generated money for major maintenance. It was an 8% instead of a 10% category that was generated. And so you guys do have that $3,940 left. And one of the things that we'd really encourage you, we're trying to, and this is clear back in 2000, golly, it's been a long time,
2007.
7 or something. I mean, these are probably older now. I'm sure it was older now. But anyway, way back when, what we'd ask you guys to do is help us kind of clear our books from this 8%, since it's the same category in reality, just a different percentage. And next time you guys use your enhancement major maintenance money, we'd ask that you spend that $39.40 first and then go into your 10%. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. We'll be working on that shortly.
Okay. Wonderful. And then again, just a reminder that your $32,389, don't overexpend that, because there's no other money that we know that's coming your way. And if you do overexpend it, there's no legal way for us to reimburse you or to make it right or bring it back to zero. It is what it is. So it's really important for you as a business manager, facility superintendent, to track that dollar amount and make sure you don't overexpend it. This is just last year's priorities for you guys. Your track and stadium was your highest priority numerically for dollar amount, and then it just came down to the least with regard to fund expenditures. And then we just broke this down again because we do have people asking for these who have the right to look at them, ask for these facility plans. We're just trying to give them an idea of what your priorities were the previous year. And so this is based on your 680 report and what you spent money on categorically. So it's just there for historical reference. Low condition scores are important. Each year we have legislators ask, and the legislature sometimes as a whole ask, are these people really spending money on their highest needs, their lowest condition scores? And so you guys, we put 3s in there. You only have 1, and you said to complete in 1 year. You have a 2 right here. That was for fire protection. Controls and instrumentation, complete in 2 years. So you need to develop a plan there. We appreciate that. And then I don't think you have any more 2s. So instead of making this a very boring report, we included your 3s as well, and kind of spurred you on to start thinking about those as well, which it looks like you are doing. And then if someone does ask about your specific school district from state government, we're able to forward this to them, and you speak on your own behalf instead of us speaking on your behalf. And I think it's just a good opportunity for you to represent your priorities to legislators and whoever else would request that. We always include this portion of what the ratings mean, which reflects percent of deferred maintenance deficiency. And then last of all, I think in this section, every 4 years we're required to redo condition assessments. So we go out, develop the scope, send out a team, a third-party consultant goes around the state and does the condition assessments. Your district obviously has been involved at least 3 in the past. Everyone that's gone through the state, and then the 4th is coming here. So maybe 5th. So with that, then we just want to let you know that here's kind of the timetable to make sure that you know that's coming. We'll develop the scope here in the fall. We'll go out and procure a professional to go out and into the communities and do these assessments. And then in the summer of 2020, kind of late spring, summer, early fall, they're going to be out in your buildings assessing those statewide. And then the one thing, and I don't know if you guys or anybody from your district has attended in the past, but we provided training of districts in Casper. Were you able to attend that last time that was offered for districts to understand the tool for doing condition assessments?
When was the last one offered?
Probably 2016.
That was prior to me, so I have not attended one myself.
Okay, so we definitely do want you to attend that, and the reason is, and you can imagine, number one is you probably want to make sure that you understand how your building's being assessed. Number 2 is you probably want to make sure that you provide the best information possible to the assessment teams coming on site so that they are as accurate as possible, because this has to do with the priorities. It helps you as a tool as a district to prioritize your needs, to have some objective data to look at, as well as then to demonstrate that you are taking care of your buildings and continuing to improve and strive to take care of them to the best of your ability. So think about that. That'll be April of 2020. Unless you guys are retiring here in the next year and a half, we'll anticipate someone attending if you can.
I will be there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, by golly. So we'll upload that and update that. And, you know, the other important thing about this is that the legislature, the state, wants to know, I mean, you own the buildings. The district, I should say, owns the buildings. But the state, which is very unique in the United States, has basically 100% of the financial responsibility for you taking care of your buildings. So the money comes from the state, you take care of your buildings. They're your buildings. But it's really important for us as an agency to make sure we provide the information to the legislature and the governor's office that tells them what their assets are, what their obligations are for taking care of these buildings, and are we gaining or not. And when we're asking for more major maintenance or more capital, to have the data behind it to demonstrate the need for requests, and to make sure that however they're investing in your buildings, that money is going as far as possible and making the biggest difference for the needs of your students within those buildings and staff. Okay, we talked about this going in front of the commission as an FYI in February, and then we'll be acting upon this as we work with the governor's office and the legislative leaders to decide how many or what dollar amount maybe we could ask for in component requests, and then we'll see what the commission wants to recommend to the select committee. We told you to, we talked about the 8%, just make sure you spend that first, appreciate it. We talked about major maintenance being used on teacherages, football field lights, etc., that you can use as enhancements. So I think we're pretty good covered there. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Charlie. One of the important things we started a year ago, and that is kind of reviewing legislative bills, working through the system, through the bill making process. And then I'm sure you guys at minimal are tracking the educational bills working through, but these are somewhat or completely related to facilities. And we just want to make sure if you have any questions, to the best of our ability, if we can answer questions. But here's a short review from Charlie.
Absolutely. We'll start with House Bill 8, the major maintenance multiplier. So one of the items that's in the major maintenance formula is the current replacement value percent. We're looking to increase that from 2 to 2.5%, which will increase the major maintenance expenditures from the school capital construction account. The estimated increase is $20 million in fiscal year 2023, which is the year that this would take place, and an additional $600,000 or 3% increase each year after. So that money will make, if it passes, that money will make a trickle down into your district, and you will see increased major maintenance. House Bill 52, Public Works and Contracts. The architect, basically for FF&E or any equipment, architects are to write specifications for products that are available from Wyoming resident suppliers. So moving down then to procurement amendments, House Bill 65. When we were formed as a department a little over 2 years ago, one of the things that they've tasked our department to do was to standardize the procurement among our department and amongst other entities in the state. Our part of this goes as follows: that we will look to adopt basically our construction procurement policies by making sure that one, bonding goes up to $50,000. Architect engineer procurement will be done at $50,000, like the formal process. The one to note in there is that between $0 and $25,000, you can go out and hand select whoever you want as a service provider. $25,000 in between and up to $49,999.99. You would solicit 3 proposals from different firms, and then after $50,000. You would do a formal process. This is applicable to the school district construction as well for the 50,000 mark. And what we were finding is that all these numbers were all over, and many of the statutes were 30, 40 years old, and so this is also an updating of those. And then for advertising for these projects, it's all over the board, and so what this bill will do is to put that at a minimum of 2 weeks for advertisement. House Bill 78, whoops, I don't know what's on there. Really, the big one there for House Bill 78 is that major maintenance payments would be distributed in quarterly amounts. This will take a year before it goes into effect. So it wouldn't affect this next July, but it would affect everything after that if passed. And so you'd get major maintenance on a quarterly basis. School finance interfund loans is more about the loans in between the school account and legislative stabilization reserve account, not really applicable. The school capital construction budget, our current supplemental budget is House Bill 80, and we'll look at that here in a moment. House Bill 94, construction contracts, indemnity provisions. Basically, what that's looking to do is that the state, let's start working on the state indemnification clauses, and they're working on that at this point. House Bill 108 basically is contractors' final payment revisions restructures. It's just modifying the final settlement and payment to contractors' procedures, updating bond requirements, and requiring that disputes be directed to a prime contractor security bond. House Bill 152 is the Wyoming Underground Facilities Notification Act. It's just an act relating to underground public utilities, facilities, modifying requirements for architectural and engineering plans that call for excavation. Senate File 49, the county zoning authority for private schools. It's just basically a measure that helps private schools have some of the same, that they be treated similarly to public schools in terms of their zoning requirements. Senate File 53, Government Contracts Labor Organization. It just prohibits governmental entities from including specified terms related to labor organization agreements and construction documents or contracts. Senate File 57, Public Records. Basically, unless there's an agreement reached upon the requestee and the entity providing the information, the record shall be delivered within 10 days of the request. And it basically includes stiffer penalties if that does not happen, up to a felony if the entity does not deliver.
So that does apply to school districts, or will if it passes.
Correct. Senate File 64, School Safety and Security. The WDE in consultation with Homeland Security, the AG's office, State Fire Marshal, and our department will work to create model school safety and security guidelines. Senate File 74, basically on this one, it's resident architect and engineer firms should have a physical office in Wyoming, and 50% of the contract shall be done with staff or contractors employed in Wyoming.
That one's kind of an interesting one because in the past, you could do qualifications based and stuff and maybe weight that more. But this is going to be a little bit different story. It's gonna basically require entities using state funds to keep money within the state and actually support local business with regard to our engineers and architects.
And then Senate Joint Resolution 1 is State Federal School Trust Lines Exchange. I'm not entirely familiar with what that one is. And he didn't really have much on that one either to begin with. So Senate File 103, State Capital Construction. Basically, it broadens the scope of the select committee. Both our two divisions and our department will report to the same committee. Procurement Pricing, Senate File 105, basically is requiring disclosure of recently completed and ongoing contracts. And then Senate Joint Resolutions 103, School Capital Construction Constitutional Amendment. This is basically a joint resolution proposing to amend the Wyoming Constitution to transfer responsibility for construction of school facilities to school districts.
Hey, so that would give you guys something to do. You could actually go out for bonds again and pay for your own facilities. What do you think? Okay, you don't have to say what you think, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting, this is the second time this has been introduced. And so I don't know what support it would have, but we at least want you to know what's out there.
Thank you.
And so then House Bill 80, what I was talking about earlier with our supplemental budget, these are the items within that budget, looking at a satellite high school in Rock Springs, the construction for that building, the construction dollars for the John C. Schiffer Alternative School in Sheridan County. Then for condition for the reappropriations, for the Shawnee Modular and Converse County School District number 1. And then on leases, just basically an increase for the Montessori Charter School in Laramie. Then the contingency anticipated for those projects for the Schiffer School and the Satellite High School. And then the security projects, which we talked about earlier, the $4.95 million, that would look to replenish some of those funds and possibly identify or give more funds for the districts to be able to do that, the security measures, and with the condition to put more flexibility in the 20 identified elements if they were identified in the security assessment. Then for major maintenance, just an increase of $1 million. The RS means value jumped up a bit, and so to cover the major maintenance costs, we needed $1 million to do that. And then last but not least, a charter school, our charter secondary school for Poder Academy here in Cheyenne.
Okay, the farther we go through the legislative session, it seems like the longer this list gets, but I know they're pretty close to probably solidifying new bills and then just working those that process through. Any questions, additional questions on all that? We know it's a lot of information, but we think that at times it can be helpful to help districts know what's going through.
No additional questions. Thank you.
It's probably the kind of stuff you guys stay up till midnight and just, if you need to sleep, you can look through all the bills. I'll just put here that Charlie Okay, so biennial requests. So one thing that's kind of different this year, again, you guys, you have very good educational or condition buildings from a condition point of view. You have you don't have a capacity need. So, but we always ask it anyway. We don't anticipate you qualifying for any capacity or capital funding, but I always want to ask the question: are you making a capital request based on criteria that would enable you to do so?
No, we aren't.
$21.
21 you transposed.
I did that last time too, or a couple times. Project plan. Did it again. Okay, and then we just want to let you know that kind of the rules of engagement for prioritizing requests from us to make recommendations to the select or to the commission, and then the commission to make recommendations to the select committee. Those rules have changed. Our rules and regs went through a public process for change, and here's the new rules. Basically, as we showed you above, we used to have an individual capacity based on percentage list of prioritization. Then we had that separate one for the top condition needs across the state for school buildings. And then based on those, what would happen was if you got funded for a capacity issue, or which yours got funded for a condition issue, when you guys rebuilt and added on and moved over to the new site for the K-12, that was based on condition. Well, those independent lists are no longer going to be independent. And so what's happening now is that there's still going to be condition FCI scores. There's still going to be capacity scores, but each building in the state of Wyoming will be represented by 3 weighted factors, and those are condition, the facility condition, that will be 50% of the weighting for a building. Capacity will be 35% of the weighting, and the way the state statute's structured, non-construction alternatives and things like that, that probably most likely will be by grade configuration, not necessarily individual district or school capacity, because for instance, a large school district may have buildings that are 70% full for may have 30 elementaries, Some are 70% full and some are 120% full. But there's non-construction alternative requirements in state statute that says maybe you ought to move your boundaries and bus a little bit differently and spread your student population out among all the available seats within the district, not just some of the buildings. So that'll be 35% weighting. And then 15% of a building score will be educational suitability. This one's an interesting one. We actually did an educational suitability or functionality assessment back in 2008-9. It was finalized 2010. So we have a list of educational suitability for a lot of the buildings within the state of Wyoming educational buildings. What we don't have is, since then, we don't have the buildings that have been, like yours, have been renovated. So we need an educational suitability assessment to be updated, just like the condition assessment every 4 years. So so we're going to be looking for direction from those above us with regard to should we and can we obtain monies to go out and redevelop an educational suitability assessment and then go out and actually do that throughout the state and update that. But for now, what we have is what we have, and we'll use it to the best that we can to prioritize upcoming requests, unless there's some legislation that comes out that kind of overtrumps these rules and changes the rules of engagement for prioritizing projects. Okay, we're now to unique issues. So we're about ready to close out. So district, I know you wanted to talk just a little bit, or the tech director anyway, with regard to a situation here, but the FEMA grant, go ahead.
Yeah, I honestly was asked by the technician that was installing our security cameras what I knew about the FEMA grant. And honestly, no one here at the district really knows anything. So I was just hoping to get maybe just a finger pointing me in a direction that I could look into this further and see if there's any opportunities there for us.
Well, I would think like other grants, you would probably need to have your district staff research the grant. FEMA's a Federal Emergency Management Administration. So I would same with Homeland Security and Department of Justice. You would just probably need to go to their websites and just to put in the research to find out what is available. We were made aware, and I think Paul made us aware of the fact that some of the DOJ grants are short-windowed grants, to where you might have, they might put one up and leave it up for about 3 weeks. So you have a 3-week opportunity to apply, and then they might approve that grant fairly rapidly. So you're just going to have to do your due diligence, keep your eyes open to FEMA, to Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, and do the research on those grants. It's the best that I can do for you. If Paul has something to add, he may.
What was it last?
Administration.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, because those are federal, we do not attempt to track those in any way, and we hear unfortunately about most of these after the grants have been awarded. We don't have anybody who's tracking those, so unfortunately that gets down to the district being responsible to go look for these. And unfortunately, the FEMA grant, I had never even heard about that one, so this is the first I've even had any inkling there was anything out there by FEMA.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the information, and I will, just, I guess, check with those websites and jump into the rabbit hole, so to speak.
Yeah, and I know in a former life, I would often hear about these grant situations, and some of them you do the research and you find, and some you don't. So yeah, I would just like you say, jump in the rabbit holes, lift rocks up, and see what you can find underneath them.
Okay, well, thank you. That answers my question.
All right. Well, we shared all the ignorance we have with you to the best of our ability. No, I was impressed. I didn't even know what FEMA stood for. So thank you, Steve. And thank you, Paul. With that, the school district, anything else before we close out the meeting?
I don't think so. We're good.
Yep.
All right. Staff, anything? Okay. If not, thank you so much for attending today. We sure appreciate you. And I look forward to maybe in a couple of years, probably not right away, but getting back up there. And before Amanda retires, I'm sure I'll be able to make it before then.
Well, I might see you a few times.
Okay. All right. With that, then, thank you. I'll go ahead and end the meeting, and we'll talk to you guys soon, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.